The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, Dr. Rudy Cashman. Welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit Show. Good thing I remembered to show up because today's talk is on memory. Isn't that interesting? And I will provide a lot of information for you, how to show you a little bit where our memory is located in our brain, how to improve our memory over time, because I'm getting a day older too, you know, and it's natural to lose a few words as we get a day older, and how to keep that to a minimum. For example, I want you to live to be 100 and have a normal memory and have good health and play me pickleball. And, well, I would say beat me. A good chance I'll beat you. Okay, let's get started. Dr. Peter Whitehouse from the Cleveland Clinic, I'm not sure he's working anymore, but he worked there a good 40 years, and then he wrote a book which I really liked because I was a neurosurgeon 42 years, okay? But I became very interested in not just operating the brain, but learning the function of it. And memory, you know, is part of it. And he wrote a book called The Myth of Alzheimer's Disease. Mm-hmm. And I read that book. I've never spoken to anyone who's ever read it, including 6 neurologists I worked in our corporation. And I even bought 10 copies to get them to read, and I couldn't get them to read it. So, but I read it through there, and what he noticed, you know, all the patients were sent there. He was a neurologist. You know, they have Alzheimer's disease, what do they need to do? And he found out that the majority of them did not have Alzheimer's disease. It's just that they were missing a few words, and some had advanced disease, and they were telling them that they had Alzheimer's disease. And he found out the majority of the patients he was looking at, he could reverse their problem with proper diet, with exercise, with stress reduction, without giving them any pills. And he determined the pills that are out there now, they don't work. Even the ones that have come out since then, I think a new one's going to come out again real soon. They're not working. They improve people for a month, I think, because they think they're better. And the medication is not the answer. Prevention, though, multiple things we're going to speak about, do have a value. That caused me to write a book because I was seeing a lot of patients too. And before my neurologist, my group came, I had no neurologist. I did it all myself, and then practiced neurosurgery too, same time. So I've gotten a lot of experience, and I practiced it 44 years. So I've been through it, all sides of it, and started reading about it and writing about it. And then I started writing books. Now I get 25 books there on Amazon, Rudy Cashman. And if you were interested in that. So I wrote one after that. I'm going to read to you a little bit out of it because I wrote one that's a little more brutal, because the fraud of Alzheimer's disease, I determined it indeed has some genetics to it, and if you have bad habits, they double the rate of expressing themselves, and you can clearly have a problem, no doubt about it. So genes do play a part, but it's a very small part. The rest of it is lifestyle-based, and just like Peter Whitehouse was saying, it can be prevented, it can be improved, and that's what I'm all about. So I'm going to read to you a little bit. I have a chapter in there, and this is the book that I wrote. It's on Amazon, and the memory. That's one of the chapters, and let me just read to you a little bit. What is memory? It is using our 5 senses to gather information, then storing it, and then retrieving it, using vision and smell and taste and hearing and touch. Our brain is the most important physical possession. If it's not working, then our body isn't working right. Obviously, our memory is our being. It's our identity. It's who we are. It is our intelligence, our personality, and humanity. Not filling your brain's potential is a tragedy. This is the age of the brain. Let's face it, you got to use it everywhere. The phone, the television, at work, driving a car. And the beautiful thing that I've learned is that you can improve it. You just aren't born with a certain number of brain cells and you go through school and that's it. No, you can improve it, and it's something called neuroplasticity. And even at my age, 39, for the 40th time, okay, add it up and find out how old I am. I'm on no pills, 132 pounds, just to give you some idea, okay? So even in old age, we can grow a few thousand brain cells each day. Depends on what you do, and I'll tell you about that. So contrary to a previous popular opinion, in old age, we can have tremendous increase in our neurotransmitters. Our memory can get even better. And by using our brain in education, reading, activity, exercise, what you eat, nutrition, using computers, we can do brain aerobics. There are brain exercises one can do. So our brain is our primary resource, and our intelligence is our currency. Our intelligence is our currency. So life in the information age is based on memory and intellect. Interesting. We must stimulate the brain to its full capacity, just like we exercise the body. A lot of people are into exercises, as I'm too, because I enjoy it. I pick a ball, I take a walk around my pond, I sing to the animals, I look at the leaves, and so we need to be in cognitive brain change. We need to try to improve our memory. Drinking a lot of alcohol, for example, would be a bad idea because every drink you take destroys a certain number of brain cells. Yeah, I operate a lot of these people. I saw patients who were missing a third of their brain, still function fairly normally, but when you scanned them, you saw a third of the brain missing. Mm-hmm. And they were still able to function. You couldn't. They obviously, and they were not living in a nursing home. But alcohol destroys brain cells. Brain cells. Could a glass of wine 2 or 3 times a week, your neuroplasticity probably would produce more new brain cells. You might get away with it, but they're now determining that any alcoholic drink destroys some brain cells. So take your choice there. Cigarettes do it too, because it affects the small blood vessels and destroys the blood supply to your brain. So our identity is the neuron and the neurotransmitter. We have about 100 billion brain cells, okay? Cells, and they have dendrites, which bring information to the cell, and axons, which take information away, okay? But So 100 billion of them, but we have 100 trillion neurotransmitters. They work at the synapse. Our nerve cells go a certain distance, and then there is a gap, and neurotransmitters work there and jump to the next dendrites who take the information, take it to the cell, and affect the function of the cell. So it's about chemistry, electrical conduction, and electrical activity, the difference between sodium, potassium, chlorides. The brain is an electric organ, but it's very low electric potential. Okay, but I personally believe, though, this is not in literature, if a person is fairly close, 4 or 5 feet away, I feel like I can feel their neurotransmitters. As a neurosurgeon, I would see patients, and after talking to them for 20 minutes, I sort of get a feeling about what they were thinking. Yeah, interesting. So the neurotransmitters, trillion of them, are up there working all the time. Okay, and some produce hormones. Serotonin is works at the locus ceruleus, and that's a quick, I feel good. It produces dopamine, like just looking or eating at a donut for most of us, or a narcotic. I'm in heaven, I feel great. Sugar does that too. That's why people can't seem to stop eating sugar, and they're becoming very, very unhealthy. And then, so we have the dopamine, and then in long-term feel good, you go further down the brain stem, these nerves, and they produce serotonin. That's the feel-good hormone that makes you feel good a little bit longer. So let's go on the trip here a little bit further. So where's memory located, for example? So, and what types of memory do we have? We have immediate memory, where we get some information, we hear it, and it's not stored anywhere. If we hear 100 things, we remember very little. So but we can have short-term memory, which can last a day or two. Then long-term memory, where memory gets stored throughout the whole brain. Okay, but things that you hear, if it first head then to the temporal lobes, that's on the side here, and they can be stored there for a few hours. And there's a part that, if it has emotions in it, it hits a certain part of the amygdala in the temporal lobe, a very small area, and they can go to the hippocampus. The hippocampus screens it and then sends it out to the rest of the brain. And long-term memory located almost all over the place. Yeah, stored in many different places. And that's interesting because, like my mother, who died at age 97, could barely remember my name. But she would repeat poetry she had learned in Germany in high school. She could repeat a whole book. So long-term memory is stored throughout the brain, but short-term memory deteriorates over time. And and the brain, they need some energy. The brain is mainly made out of fat and water. It's a fatty organ. And when you hear a lot about taking cholesterol drugs, 80% of the people out there are on cholesterol drugs. Yes, 80%. I know that for certain. Their doctors are prescribing them statin drugs. Okay, Lipitor is an example. There's about 5 or 6, maybe a dozen different ones, but 5 or 6 are very popular. And that concerns me because statins lower your cholesterol. You need cholesterol. Your brain is made from cholesterol. Every membrane surrounding your cells, everywhere in your body, but especially in the brain, are made from cholesterol. And we're giving statin drugs to people. So if you read a book by Evans, The Toxic Effects of Statins, read that book, that thick. I have it in the trunk of my car. And statins can cause heart disease, can cause dementia, memory loss. Yes, because it interferes with the pathways of metabolism of 10 different pathways. I didn't say start yours. I didn't say stop it. Show the books to your doctor. But read it yourself, because I had somebody recently who was on them and they having significant trouble, and his doctor said, the companies are making about $85 billion a year on selling statin drugs. And I've seen some serious complications. I didn't say to start it. I didn't say to stop it. Read the book, check with your doctor, maybe read another book. I have 7 books at home that tell you about the science of statin drugs. They affect your memory because they lower your cholesterol. Cholesterol can cause some inflammation in some people, and really it can do some harm, but the majority of the time they can harm you if you lower them. Okay? So I already mentioned to you the myth of Alzheimer's disease, but Peter Whitehouse, because he saw those people. I even talked to him on the phone. He was going to an international conference. He was that famous, and he was walking up the steps of an airline heading to Europe to give a talk. But I spoke to him, and it concerns me that, as we get a day older, we do miss some words. Getting older, definitely, I miss some words here and then. But you got to be careful, as Peter Whitehouse was saying, that about telling people, well, you got Alzheimer's disease. The trouble is, if they're missing a few words, they can exist fine in life, and they can start living into the role. We know some people, famous people, who, quote, had Alzheimer's disease, and you hear it on the news. But they can start living the life, I can't remember anything, I can't work. They quit their job, they quit driving a car when they quit doing things. Be careful about that, because I remember years ago, a lady passed by me in the door to our building my office is in, and she says, because I had operated on it, she says, what are you doing here, Mary? She said, my husband is going to have some tests by the neurologist and get some scans today because he has Alzheimer's disease. I said, well, what's his life like? Well, he does farming for my son. And I said, how's that going? He does a great job. My son is really appreciative because he's making money on the farm and giving some money to Dad, and he's very happy. You see what I mean? So you're missing a few words. So what? And that is not affecting his life a great deal. As we get a day older, and this man was in the 70s, we're going to miss a few words. If he had those tests done by the neurologist, they would have said, certainly some of these tests, and I'm not sure I do well on them, he missed a few words, and he said, and they would do a scan, and then they say, well, you've got Alzheimer's disease. Odds are he'd start living into the role. He would quit farming. He would quit doing things. Before you know it, he's disabled and he's depressed. You see my point? You got to be very careful about telling somebody that. It can affect their their life. So through life, by age 85, about 50% of the people already have some significant memory loss, but that's a normal part of life. If you read a book, The Blue Zones, for example, Loma Linda, different parts of the world, and people are living in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s, and if they miss in a few words, but a lot of them are walking too, and they're optimistic, and they're eating the right food. So we can live to a ripe old age with a normal memory. One of the most important things to do as we get a day on is exercise. Exercise and nutrition are the 1-2 biggest preventer of memory loss as we get a day on. And of course, if we're eating right, we don't get type 2 diabetes. Then, because they have insulin resistance, and the brain loves sugar. The brain does run a lot better on ketones, though. Those ketones are non-sugary. They're made out of fat. The brain loves them. And I used to think when I drink a cup of coffee in the morning, I feel really good. I always thought it was the caffeine. It may be partly the caffeine, but I do fasting. I have no disease or anything. I eat 2 meals a day. I call it Rudy's Keto 16-8. With 16 hours, I'm not eating, and after about 4 or 5 hours, my sugar level goes down, my insulin level goes down, fat cells open up. Fat I ate the day before open up, and they go to the brain, form ketones. And the ketones, the brain loves ketones. You think better, you exercise better. Because I don't eat in the morning, I don't eat till around noon because of the 16-8 fasting. What you don't realize that our body secretes hormones in the morning, growth hormone, some steroids. The stomach hormone that thinks that you're hungry goes down. That enzyme goes down, and this keeps your blood sugar like this. Yes, that happens to all of us every day. Those hormones start getting secreted around 5 o'clock, so you can. I don't feel a little bit hungry till noon because the exercise turns appetite off too. And then if you eat in that 8-hour period, eat only in that 8-hour period, you'll be 132 pounds, which I am almost every day. I have no reason to do that. I just, give talks on this, and I think I should be an example. Okay, so there are reasons, parts of the brain that are involved with memory. Remember, I mentioned to you the frontal lobes have to do with cognition, the temporal lobes. The occipital lobes have a lot of visual memories, and the parietal lobe has spatial memories. Those are locations that our brain is in. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Remember I said about 4 or 5% of people have a gene, ApoE4 gene, but 50% of those, and they tend to have severe memory problems, and they can be at a younger age, but normally they will not express themselves if you're exercising and eating a proper eating, and reduce stress and don't drink a lot of alcohol and stay away from cigarettes and narcotics, then the gene will not express itself. So you can have, and some people have 1 gene, some will have 2. And if 2 genes, you're more likely to have memory problems. But so what I'm thinking, Dr. Peter Whitehouse was thinking, in these books I have in front of me, are thinking that Alzheimer's disease, where we have severe memory loss. I mean, there are people like that. A lot of people like that, because 80% of the people now in this community have diabetes. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't have diabetes. Some people might say, but they need to get blood sugar and serum insulin. Get serum insulin tests even on your children because they can start at a very young age. They get diabetes, and they could have Alzheimer's disease, severe memory loss by age 35 or 40, or grab their chest or die of a heart attack. Serum insulin testing, which industry literally is not allowed to be done to children. Pediatricians are negligent here too, because we could prevent diabetes and its tremendous effects on the brain at a very early age. Okay, so and we have also a lot of how we're thinking, whether we're depressed or happy, is determined by our gut. We have trillions of bacteria living out on our gut. And the type of bacteria that you have in there is determined by the type of food you are eating. And the type of food you're eating will determine the type of bacteria living on your teeth. It depends what type of bacteria is there, and they determine whether you get dementia or heart disease. Yes. So to teach your kids to brush their teeth and floss at a very, very young age is a very important thing. Dental health is critical to your health. I didn't know about it almost till I was in college. My parents didn't try to brush my teeth. And now twice a day, and I floss and I wash them out every day, and I have no dental problems. But they can cause disease. Take care of your teeth. And these bacteria that are in your body, because you have the wrong type of bacteria in your gut, a lot of the serotonin and dopamine is made in your gut. Yes, not just in your brain. So how you feel, a lot of it is determined by the hormones being secreted by those bacteria. And so if you're having the wrong bacteria there, you can get inflammation in the body. And you can test to run as HSCRP. What's your CRP level? People eating a sugary diet will have different bacteria living in their gut, and they can in turn affect inflammation of the brain and cause diseases. So, and this can produce free radicals. Free radicals are produced where your molecules are missing one atom, and it's determined by the type of food that you're eating. So to avoid free radicals is very important. So the brain works harder than any other organ. It's 2% of our body weight, but it uses 25% of our oxygen. So if you're smoking, for example, and short on oxygen, and other things can cause a shortness of oxygen, lack of exercise, poor diet, stress, alcohol, cigarettes, lack of sleep. Sleep is very important for good health. And as we're getting a day older, so the brain needs energy. And if we have diabetes, insulin resistance, it can't get the energy. We're taking statin drugs, it can't get the energy. So ketones, which I explained to you already, are needed. And fasting does improve your memory. And the easiest way to fast is not to skip days or months or years, is this, what I teach. I even wrote a book, which you can get on the internet, that explains it. Reversing type 2 reversing type 2 diabetes, Rudy's Keto 16-8. In other words, fast, and you'll be living on ketones, and you'll get rid of diabetes. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Very important. And I remember I said our brain, if you weigh the brain of people who've had dementia or use a lot of alcohol or smoke a lot, their brain weighs less. Their brain is smaller. And they found people who are overweight who are much more likely to have diabetes. You can be thin and have diabetes. It's your blood tests that count. Get your blood test. Get a fasting blood sugar and a serum insulin and the CRP. So blood sugar dysregulation, inflammation, lipid dysregulation, you're more likely to get dementia. So key factors about Alzheimer's disease, majority of the time it's end stage. You go through years of maybe some cognitive decline and maybe missing a few words, and the majority of the time it's an end stage. And much more common as we get older, but it can be avoided most of the time. The actual disease itself, from the genetics thing, is very low incidence. It's more likely if you get 2 or 3 people in your family who have it, but maybe most of them are diabetics. And for example, so what is the pathology? What do they see if they look under the microscope? You hear a lot about amyloid plaques and tau tangles. Amyloid plaques come inside the cell, and then you can have tangles outside the cell, and that's pathology they can see. And they thought that was the cause of Alzheimer's disease, and they're now starting to realize that is the result. That's what happens when nerve cells are dying. We have some nerve cells that die every day in all of us, but through neuroplasticity, you can build them up by doing things that was just spoke about. Exercise being most important thing. If you do fasting, that in that time, in that 16-8, after about 8 hours, all the blood sugar has been used up, and you're now living on ketones, and your brain is undergoing, your body is undergoing autophagia. Autophagia. It's eliminating bad cells, building new cells, getting the garbage out, bringing new cells in. So, especially if you have memory problems, to do some fasting, do the 16-8. I think that not only is protective of the brain, it may build, through neuroplasticity, build you a new brain. So when you have people, say, like Parkinson's disease, who have significant dementia at end stage associated with him, to follow this fasting 16-8, which I described, they might be able to stop the deterioration or even improve. I just told a patient that yesterday, that who was having these effects from Parkinson's disease. It may be the answer to it, actually. And he was Indian, and his mother had fed him rice. Most of his life, he's eating rice. Rice is a sugar. You Google it, and it says, there's no sugar. It's a carbohydrate. Your biome breaks it down. It's sugar, man. So did that cause this Parkinson's disease, which he's having at age 40? I really do wonder. But looking at the brains, and they've done studies. The nun study was one of them, where they studied a bunch of nuns. There were some that lived to be 100, and after they died, the autopsy of the brain, they saw no neurofibrillary tangles. They saw no tau. Then they had others who had a totally normal life, and autopsies, when they reached 100, they were full of fibrillary tangles and tau. So that's not totally answered, but we do know that diabetes, and because the brain loves sugar, and you have insulin resistance, you don't get the sugar to the brain, and they have tremendous rate of dementia. Most diabetics have some dementia. If you were to test them in detail, get rid of your diabetes, 6 weeks, look at my YouTube shows. YouTube, Rudy Cashman, shows you how to get rid of diabetes. I beg you to do it, but you must act. Your doctor is just going to hand you a prescription. Here's your insulin, that'll just promote the disease. You want to get rid of your disease. And so what are protective factors? I mean, exercise, unwind, de-stress. Remember I said restore. By that I mean do brain-stimulating activities. There are things you can do. You can read, work, have purpose in life, play cards, do puzzles. I think what you do is a little different for everyone, and then optimize it even by certainly eating the right food. That's not optimizing. You can do play games. There are all sorts of things you can do. And a good memory trick is a simple one that, I was a neurosurgeon all my life. I'm treating about paralysis and deaf, and this is the way my brain is working. So when people gave me their name, I never listened to it in the first place. I could remember the name. I thought there was something wrong with me. And then I realized you gotta listen to the name in the first place. And look at them. Something that connect. Look, snap, connect. And it is a good way to remember something. So look at what you're trying to memorize. And maybe even if you do something exaggerated, put a hat on them or something they're wearing and connect it, you're much more likely to remember. Which kind of goes back a little bit in history. Let's go back in history, memory a little bit. They didn't have books years ago. You couldn't type it out or write it out. And you can think back about 400 or 500 years before the birth of Christ. The Greeks had developed systems, and then the Romans invented what they called a Roman room. They would take a memory, and you would memorize a room, a big room with all sorts of things hanging there, from lights to pictures to chairs and whatever. And what someone told you, or if they were listening, say they had people who could listen to a 1-hour whole speech, and when they walked out of the room, had the whole thing memorized. Can be done. That's how they did it years ago. They had memorists, and the word mnemonics, and that was really named after a god. It is a god. So they had memory techniques. They would hang the memory in the room, the link system, and that's even available today. There's a very good book by Harry Lorraine, Memory Mastery, and it's very interesting, and he talks about the link system in there, and he says, and I read this a number of years ago, and I sort of, I look, snap, connect, so I'm linking, but there are some memorists that that like they can have a deck of cards and memorize every darn card. You hold one over and they can tell you the order they're in. And there's a technique to these things. They link it to something, and And in this book, he describes different types of link system, and he feels anybody can learn it. You can hook it to faces. We seem to be able to group things. That's the reason the telephone numbers are 3 and 4, is that we can remember them better. Mm-hmm. We can remember about up to 9 numbers. 7 would even be better. If you chunk them 3 and 4, you're much more likely to remember. They have definitely have established that is the way the brain is. But you can take a person who has an average memory, and teach them a linking system, and they can become unbelievable memory people, mm-hmm. but yet have an average language. That's been tested to people who go in front of an audience, and they seem to have a memory that is just unbelievable. But in years ago, remember I said there were no TVs, no books, and there's a technique to it. And Harry Lorraine says any of us can develop this system. And it sounds like fun. So if you get time in your hands, read Henry Lorraine's book, and because it's entertaining to people, you can challenge them with it. And like I said, I use a link system already, but I think I'm going to establish this further, and it will be interesting. Give me something to do. So let's go back to Alzheimer's disease a little bit. There are actually about 20 different genes. Mm-hmm. About the APO234, APE4s, they're the most common. And they produce a protein, apolipoprotein E, which helps regulate fats. They reduce resistance to Alzheimer's disease 10 to 20 years. So, but risk does not mean disease, okay? So if you have no ApoE gene, 50 to 85% develop Alzheimer's disease at age 85, okay? If you have one ApoE4, remember ApoE4s are protective, then 50% develop at age 65. But have 2 copies of it, only 2% of the population has it. So 90% of us, if we follow a healthy lifestyle of eating right, of exercise and stress reduction, and avoid alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs, 90% of us, we would totally eliminate the risk. That's a big one. And then we have neuroplasticity, which you can even improve your brain, okay? And in Down syndrome, you know the Down patients, you've seen them, and 1/3 will have Alzheimer's disease at age 50 to 59. But they have found if they have good health habits, remember Down is due to a genetic problem, good health habits, 50% less incidence. Huh? Isn't that interesting? And so you can supersede your genetic risk. It's just like exercise increases your muscle strength, build your muscles, but you can also build up your brain. Beautiful. Isn't that wonderful news? Wonderful news. And so there have been some other books written, and I have some of this here. So where is our memory located? I mean, well, it's the connections. It's the neurotransmitters, isn't it? I mean, we have all 100 billion brain cells up there, hopefully. But it's the connections that determine your memory. But where's the memory actually? They have since found that you wouldn't believe this. Your memory is located in little vesicles, little they have seen them through electron microscope. They have looked through it, and there's pictures of them in this book, Memory, from mild to molecules, from mild, to molecules, and you can very nano size, but they're little balls like that, and the hundreds of them, and that is your memory. So the memory really has a physical presence, and this explains it in great detail. They then have to determine, too, there are types of memory. For example, I play pickleball or piano or tennis. I played for 45 years at least. Is that in that memory, you can develop dementia, but that memory will stay. And that is called non-declarative memory. Non-declarative memory. So a person can have severe dementia, but yet can continue to play a sport. Mm-hmm. And a separate part of the brain. And then we have declarative memory, which would be how to do your job, how to run a machine. That's declarative memory. Okay, and so that is very interesting. And so we have non-declarative memory, and we have declarative memory. They're different memories. So you can have severe dementia and yet play your sports, and so that as affected by nutrition and stress and things of that nature. So, and your memory is located in these molecules. And as I mentioned, if you're overweight, you're much more likely, and probably have diabetes, you're much more likely to have memory problems. Not everyone, though, okay? But you're more likely. So, reducing your stress level helps reduce your expression of your genes. So we have in us our end of our chromosomes, okay? We have genes, and they are called, and that's epigenetics. We have extensions of our chromosomes, okay? We have extensions of our chromosomes, and we can influence them by our activities, and they're called telomeres, and their length can determine how long that you live, and how you live, and so we, by our action, we can affect the length of our chromosomes. So, for example, people from Japan, when they moved to the United States, started eating more of a Western American type diet, their dementia rates went up because it affected their telomeres, So getting older may not be the cause, but the cause is the type of food that they're eating. We have found drugs generally don't work. I mean, they'll hype them up, and I noticed the stock price of one of the companies that's got a new drug coming out went up 16 points the other day, but these drugs do very little. Follow the path that I'm speaking about. This is a foodable illness. Genetics plays a very small part. So the solution is in plain sight. Lifestyle intervention is important. It's the cause of cognitive decline. Okay? Avoid diabetes. Get rid of it. And there was a book written by a man and his wife who I even personally met from Loma Linda University, and they this fascinated them because the Seventh-day Adventists at Loma Linda are living on the average 10 years longer, so they have a less incidence of dementia. And they eat more of a vegetarian diet. But I didn't agree with everything in their book because vegetables, if you eat 90% vegetables diet, they have lectins in them. Lectins affect your gut, and your gut can affect your brain. Remember, it can affect your teeth. So I didn't totally agree with their solution, although it's a better way of eating. Vegetarian way of eating is a better way of eating. But as I mentioned, ketones to me are the answer. And if you're having a memory problem, to switch to ketone and fasting, that's, I think, would be the best treatment. And you have a chance, and I really do wonder, like the dementia that we see secondary, like in Parkinson's disease, some other diseases, that might be dramatically helpful. So nutrition, exercise, unwind, restore, sleep, good sleep, optimism, wake up with a smile on your face. Learn a song. I sing to the birds in the morning. Okay, and so there are about 7 stages on the road. Remember, I said I think Alzheimer's disease mainly is just an end stage. That's what's at the end. But you want to get off that road. So stage 1 would be occasional forgetfulness, last 20 years. Stage 2, mild decline, can last another 20 years. Can still be avoided. Stage 3, forgetfulness noted by others. You may start having some difficulty at work. And stage 4, things are now progressing, and they may take the car away, and you may just stay at home. You may become aggressive, difficult in your finances. And stage 5, and then through 7. Where you may be unresponsive. And people in the stage 6 and 5 have difficulty sleeping at night. They become restful. Let's talk about other dementias which occur too. Vascular dementia, where people have vascular disease, but that's same with diabetes. It's also called Lewy body dementia. The main symptoms are spatial, emotional vacillation, Parkinson's symptoms we talked about, abnormal gait, tremors, stiffness, and they can be frozen in place. You just can't move. I remember a doctor writing in a book at a New York institution. There were 2 roommates that were totally frozen in place, in place. And a nurse working there turned on some music because she had done this. She had worked there for many years. And these guys loosen up and they start fighting each other. Turn the music off, right away they're frozen in place. That is seen with advanced brain diseases. Matter of fact, I have gone in the past myself to nursing home and played the accordion and the piano, and the people that were having advanced dementia problems. The nurse told me afterwards, for 3 days, they were much happier and moving much better. So music can affect the neurotransmitters and have important. And there's frontotemporal dementia associated with ALS, which is a muscular disease, normal pressure hydrocephalus, they have memory loss. So there are other reasons for dementias, and you can only determine over time which one, because you can, with different scans, with PET scans, SPECT scans, MRI, CTs, and some of those you give them some sugar, and through metabolism, this part of the brain will light up, so you can diagnose it a little bit better. And the brain loves to eat. Remember, cholesterol is good for the brain, so what are 20 brain nourishing foods? Okay, avocados, good fats. I had some today. Beans are recommended because they have antioxidants in them, but remember, watch out, make sure you're not lectin sensitive. And blueberries, broccoli, coffee causes secretion of acetylcholine, makes you feel better. Extra virgin olive oil is good. Flax seeds, herbal tea, seeds, leafy greens, algae, mushrooms, some nuts, some sweet potatoes. So fasting improves brain health, as I mentioned, because of the ketones. The brain loves ketones. And the brain loves, they used to think only sugar can provide energy for the brain. They thought it was only sugar. Now find out that it's ketones. So if you do 16-8 like I suggest, I feel like really moving and going, optimistic. I thought it's the coffee. I think it's the ketones. So try intermittent fasting. They have now found that intermittent fasting, 16-8, is more efficient than long-term fasting, missing days, 2 days a week or something of this nature. And so what are some tests you could run? I mean, some blood tests, fasting blood sugar, serum insulin, your HD high-density triglycerides, triglyceride ratio, that's a big one, and a thyroid test, HSCRP to look for inflammation. Vitamin D is important, and lead and mercury. A carotid ultrasound test to see if you have some arteriosclerosis. They found that to be very predictive of vascular disease. Fitness testing, you get VO2 max is a good one, or MET test level. And sleep study, if you're way overweight, a lot of people have sleep apnea where they essentially stop breathing. So this is an important test. And you can go to www.brainhq.com to test your intelligence. Structural brain imaging has some value, CT or MRI. But usually insurance doesn't cover that. Functional MRIs, I mentioned PET scan, functional MRI, genetic testing, all have some value, but the most important thing really is follow the exercise nutrition, and don't have any of those bad habits. So I think I've covered this subject pretty good. You may want to do some reading. I think to read this memory mastery thing, it may be develop one system that you're really good at. The next show I do on this, which I'll do again in a couple of years, I'll be ready with that one. I already do the length system where you're sure that you listen to what they're saying and then hook it to something and maybe exaggerated image, and you're much more likely to remember. That's a good one. That's a big thing. And maybe read The Fraud of Alzheimer's Disease here, where it summarizes memory things real good. And remember, the good news is we have neuroplasticity. So even at age 39, for the 48th time, I can still learn things. I'm still getting better at pickleball. And now I'm going to read this memory mastery book, and in 2 years, yeah, I'll be here 2 years from now. Don't forget, I'm going to live to be 100 and to be healthy. You want it, what's the use of living that long if you're not healthy and you don't have a good memory? That's our dream. But thanks for watching this show, and you can go to YouTube, Rudy Cashman, Amazon Rudy Cashman, Facebook Rudy Cashman, and you'll see 1,000 previous TV shows. And now I'm going to start podcasting too, and you'll gain a lot of knowledge. Why am I doing all this? I'm doing it for free because I care about you. I'm a doctor after all, and that's what he told me to do. We love you. Bye-bye.